our QR code. Join us to follow what we do at PHIRu. Once again, thank you all for being part of the growing international community. Together, let us demonstrate that research can be faster, smarter, more collaborative, and ultimately more impactful. Welcome to the PHIRu Chisquares Hands-on Manuscript Masterclass. I wish you all an engaging, productive, and inspiring session. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lungile. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prof. I hope you can hear me. Try connecting to headphones. Can you hear me? Please confirm.
Yes, we can hear you, Lungile.
Okay, awesome. Okay, awesome.
Yes,
Thank you so much for that. And I will now introduce Prof. Akere. Prof. Akere, I hope you're able to unmute yourself. Please confirm.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have Prof. Akere Omonkua. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Research Excellence Fund. Before joining ARIF, she was the project coordinator of the World Bank-supported Africa Center of Excellence in Reproductive Health Innovation and a member of the University Research Development Committee, both at the University of Benin, Nigeria. She has previously supported ARIF as a member of the College of Experts, a reviewer, and a faculty member. Prof. Omonkua is a biochemist by training, and her research focus is determining the efficacy, safety, phytochemical content, and mechanisms of action of traditional medicinal plants used to treat diabetes, malaria, and reproductive disorders. Over the last 7 years, Prof. Omonkua has dedicated a large proportion of her time to research capacity development of early to mid-career researchers, as well a driving policies and programs to strengthen research ecosystems within university. Welcome, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the entire team over there for inviting me to give this opening remark. I'm truly honored to be here. I was going to start by saying my name, but I think you have done a great job, so I'm just going to move on to tell you what I think about this very laudable event that is going on. Thank you for inviting me into this to speak at the beginning of this masterclass. I think that one of the things I have seen over the years in my endeavor in the research capacity development space is the conviction that I hold dearly, that Africa is rich in excellent research talent. Across the continent, I have seen brilliant minds generating knowledge, addressing very pressing issues, and advancing innovation. However, talent alone is not enough. We must intentionally create opportunities and platforms and support systems to enable researchers transition their ideas into fundable proposals, into high quality publication. And this masterclass is a very clear example of this kind of support. When I was registering, I saw that more than 1,000 individuals have registered for this program. This number is truly remarkable, and it does speak volumes, not only about the immense interest in research and scholarly publications, but also the significant demands for practical guidance and mentorship in manuscript writing, and I dare say in all other aspects of research. I would say that as you participate in this program, I encourage you to approach it with purpose and commitment. Apply what you learn as quickly as possible. The true value of knowledge is not just in acquiring it, but in applying it to your own situations. So for every lesson, every technique, and every insight that you gain in this masterclass, I encourage you to translate it into action. I would also like to encourage participants to build connections here. Professor Oladimeji has alluded to that in his comments, and I encourage every one of you to take advantage of that. I also encourage the organizers to facilitate this as much as possible by forming peer learning groups and networks. Such communities can really foster collaboration, it can provide constructive feedback, and create accountability that is needed for you to turn your aspirations into achievement. I can tell you that some of the strongest partnerships sometimes come from learning environments like this. Excellence is never accidental. It is the result of continuous learning, discipline, practice, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to improve ourselves. The most successful researchers are not necessarily those who have the greatest talent, but they are those who consistently develop their craft. In my experience, I have seen researchers do wonderful things when they come together to pursue a particular goal and to drive solutions to pressing challenges within their community. So as you begin this journey, I want to encourage each of you to take full advantage of this opportunity. Engage actively, ask questions, learn from your peers and from the facilitators, and challenge yourselves to reach new heights in your research and publication journey. Once again, I want to warmly welcome you to this masterclass, and I hope that you take full advantage of it and it becomes a very transformative experience for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. Prof. Agaku?
Yes.
You ready?
Yes. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for coming. Without wasting further time, let's quickly share my screen and let's get started. All right. So today's session is supposed to be a hands-on session on how we can think about the manuscript process. It's both an art and a science. And so we'll look at both the art form. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, please can we mute ourselves? Can we all mute ourselves, please? All right. So what is research and why do we do research? The goal of research is to identify the truth. In epidemiology, we say that everything we observe in the universe can be explained by one of three things: truth, chance, or bias. And this is why we do research. The goal is to say, how do we isolate the truth from bias and from chance? So every single thing we do in research boils down to this slide: isolating truth from chance and bias. And that's why we call it research and not simply search. Research means to search over and over and over. It's an iterative process. And so today we're going to see how that process is iterative and what are we looking for when we search, right? If we want to identify the truth, how do we identify the truth? Because keep in mind, there are two types of truth. There is the whole truth and there is the whole truth. The one with holes and the one without holes, the one that is complete. Obviously, the one we want is the whole truth. So how do we isolate the whole truth and separate it from chance and from bias? Now, one of the things we want to take note of is that we don't live in a bubble. And as AI becomes more and more accessible, journals are also tightening what constitutes good science, right? This was a paper published in the BMJ a few months ago. And the bottom line of this paper is that let us ban, according to the authors, papers that are just exploratory, like factors associated with, I'm sure all of us have seen papers like that. Factors associated with XYZ, right? The current movement in science is that those are not rigorous enough, right? Those are just exploratory fishing expeditions. And so the stance of journal editors now is, well, we want to push for more rigorous science. And so those kinds of papers should not be published, according to the authors. So we need to be aware of this as we come up with research. Obviously, you don't want to spend all that time and effort developing a manuscript only for it to be rejected as not meeting the minimum requirements. So today we will look at a separate framework for developing manuscripts, a causal framework, right? obviously, if exploratory approaches like this are not acceptable anymore, then we should move towards what is acceptable. So what do we call a causal framework for manuscript development? It means that you should have a well-defined exposure, you should have a well-defined outcome, and you should control for things that might confound the relationship between the exposure and the outcome. We're going to look into that more detail in a hands-on way. But we want to keep this concept in the back of our minds that we don't want to. Exploratory research is good, but in this age and time, if you're serious about publishing, you want to move to a causal framework where you look at an exposure and an outcome, right? So that frames the context for how we're going to do the session today, looking at manuscript from a causal framework. So let's jump right into the hands-on part. So where do we start? It starts with an idea. So I must have an idea to start, and this is the part that AI cannot help you. You as a researcher must come up with an idea that makes sense. And the question is, what idea? There are obviously a million things that I could explore. Well, for one thing, you could focus on what is the burning issue in society at that moment, right? Now, the moment we live in, the biggest issue is AI, right? So obviously, that's not a question here. That's just an idea. That's just a major area of research. We'll say, okay, AI. All right. So the next question is, what about AI? That's how we'll start refining that process. Number one, what about AI am I interested in looking at? Number two, where's the data coming from? In general, there are two approaches to developing manuscript. Number one is the hypothesis-driven approach, where I come up with a hypothesis and say, I hypothesize that there's an association between AI usage and, let's say, academic performance, right? And then I have to go and collect data to test that hypothesis. So the hypothesis comes first, the data comes next. The second approach is a data-driven approach, where I take a data set that is existing and I look at it and I say, what can I get? What can I publish from this? If you don't have money, if you are just a student, or if you have, you don't have a lot of time, then you might want to explore the data-driven approach, because it takes money, it takes time to collect data. So for today's session, we will look at the data-driven approach. We want to focus on AI. So here's the basics. Here's what we know. We know that we want to do something about AI, and we know that we don't have the resources to go and start collecting data. We want to use an existing data set. So what is the next step from there? Well, the great news is that most AI systems are now connected to the internet. So let's go to the internet and let's ask AI for sources of data. So for example, I can say national US data sets on AI, right? So AI can at least search the web and summarize the information for me, and I can then explore. So here, AI has listed some data sets that I might want to consider. Household and individual AI usage. There is adoption by geography. In this case, I'm interested in individual level data. So let's look at this one here, the household trends and outlook pulse survey. So let's Google that and let's go to that survey, household pulse survey. So this is how you could think about the process when you're starting, you don't know where to get the data. Again, the use of AI is not just in taking data and using it. It's just in the initial phases of also thinking through the topic. So this is a household pulse survey. You come here, you see data tables. Those are the summarized data. But what we're interested in are public use files. Most publicly available data sets are organized this way, where you have the public data sets in forms of raw data. You always want to get the raw data to analyze. So let's click on this and we will explore which data sets we want to use. So here you have the data sets arranged in years. This is excellent if you want to look at trends over time, because a very interesting question might be, how has the use of AI changed over time? So you have multiple years, and within each year, you have multiple data sets. The Household Pulse survey is a survey that collects information every few months. It was originally designed during the era of COVID. And so it was collecting information every 2 weeks. But even after COVID ended, the survey has been maintained, and now it collects information on a range of topics. So here let's look at the most recent data set that we have. This was in June 2025. So let's click on this, and we have a file here that is zipped. So again, remember at this point, we only have a broad area that we want to explore. We know that we want to do something about AI. We don't know exactly what it is yet. That's the part we're going to go into now. And we have found a data set that supports what we want to explore. So let's now go into the data files we have here. So here you have 3 different files. You have a dictionary. That's the first thing you always want to explore first. The data dictionary tells you what's in the data set. So please do not ever jump into the data set and take it and start analyzing without first going through the dictionary. So let's go through the dictionary for this and see what we could possibly explore from this research paper. So let's explore. Let's open the dictionary. Okay, and this opened right here. All right, so this is the data dictionary for the survey we just opened. So when you open a dictionary, what do you do? Well, first of all, you can just, it may be a very large document. So you want to first of all see whether the topic you're interested in is even in there. So I'm going to do Control F and search for intelligence. Aha, so we see some questions that have to do with intelligence. So here you see AI refers to computer systems that do so and so and so. The question is here: in the past 2 months, have you or anyone in your household an AI tool for any of the following? And so you have the options are brainstorming, you have using this inside an app, we have no one has used an AI tool, and so on and so forth. So at least we have some hope now that we can use this data set for what we intend to use, right? So there are questions on AI, and so your job now as the researcher is to go through each of these questions, right? And say, okay, this is what we have in the data set. Remember that when you're using public data sets, the mantra is when the desirable is not available, the available must be desirable. It is hardly the case that you are going to pick a publicly available data set and find everything you want inside. You're not the one that designed it for a particular research question. So you have to learn how to make do with what you have. So that's what we're going to do now. So we'll go through all the questions now, and we'll figure out which ones are possible for what we want to do. So we have questions looking at reasons for use, and then we have perceptions. Please indicate which of the following you agree with. AI tools make me more productive. That's the question on perceptions. I control when I use AI. I control how my data is used by AI. AI has changed my field of work. I trust information from AI. I feel prepared to use AI at the moment, and so on. I'm worried about AI's impact on my career, and none of the above. And that's it. So that's all the questions we have about AI, maybe about 10 of them. Now, what do we do next? Now we have to create a research question from these questions. So we have these pieces of questions that are there. Our job as a researcher now is to say, with what we have available, what can we explore? Now, we'll have to brainstorm, right? So this is the point where you bring out your piece of paper, your jotter, your tablet or whatever, and brainstorm and say, what can we explore from these topics? So let's do that. Now, as you are doing your exploration, you obviously want to see what exists in the literature, right? But brainstorm first. Don't worry about what other people have done at this point yet. Just worry about what you can explore from that topic. And again, remember that we're trying to use a causal framework where we look at exposure, outcome. So instead of just saying, What are factors associated with AI use? That's exploratory. That's what journals do not want. We have to frame it more in a way that is causally framed. In other words, what is the association between X and Y, right? And when we're looking at that, we have to explore confounders. We'll talk about confounders in a minute. But for now, let's brainstorm about possible research questions that we could have. So this is the point, like I said, where you bring out your documents, you bring out your, if you're using let me bring up my points and create a page, and you then have to just type your ideas, right, or dictate however you interact with documents. So let's brainstorm. So one topic I could say, all right, geez, I'm interested in what people are interested in at the moment. When you hear people talk about AI, it always falls into almost two buckets. One is just hysteria that, oh, AI is going to take away jobs, all right? AI is going to take away my jobs. You hear of things like, oh, AI will not take your job, but the person who knows AI will take away your job, or something along those lines, right? Research is all about how do we take anecdotes and test them empirically. So that is a very powerful angle to look at. Remember, you're not writing for yourself, you're writing to get published. So you have to address things that will interest people. So let's see, what kind of topics can we frame? Well, it could be something descriptive, like, for example, disparities in AI use and productivity. So in other words, we have data on race, we have data on educational levels, we have data on income. The question is, who uses AI more? Who feels more productive, right? That's one angle we could explore, just general disparities. So disparities is always a good angle. If you are stuck and you're like, geez, how do I approach this research paper? Disparities is always an angle you could look at, like how are things different? And disparities simply means, for those of us who don't do social research, it means, inequalities where the inequalities are driven by some sense of unfairness, right? So there's an unequal use, but that unequal use is driven by some unfairness somewhere. Maybe there are, disparities in income. Maybe the poor people cannot access AI. Maybe those who are not well educated cannot. Somewhere along the line, there is some sense of unfairness that is driving this gap. So that's one angle we could explore: disparities in AI use and productivity. We could also look at associations, and there are many associations we could look at. It could be associations between the level of proficiency in AI use and concerns about AI taking their jobs, right? So that's one angle we could look at. Because in that survey questionnaire, we had a question that says this, right? AI tools make me more productive. We have questions like, I control when I use AI, I control how my data is used by AI. AI has changed my field of work. Whenever you're selecting questions at this point, you want to make sure that there's some common sense to how you are framing the question. Like it follows some logical reasoning, that it's logically coherent. So I could argue that, well, in fields that have been dramatically changed by AI, people in those fields are more likely to feel worried that AI will just consume their jobs. A janitor who has to go and do everything manually is less worried about AI taking over his job because he knows that might not happen overnight. Sure, we could develop robots that will come in and do all of that, but he's not so worried compared to the guy whose job is just mostly documentation, and he's worried that, geez, AI will take away the jobs, right? It's one thing to have a theory about something. It's another thing to test the theory empirically. That's what research is all about, right? So at this stage, when you're thinking through the topic, you want to make sure that there's some common sense thinking to support why you are framing it that way. So I could say, well, I think there's going to be an association between the degree of change in one's field by AI and concerns about livelihood. Or it could be also that we could hypothesize that there's an association between how prepared one feels to use AI in their daily life and their worry. If I feel very prepared, I feel I have bolstered my skills in all regards, and I am very well proficient to use AI, then perhaps I'm not so worried that AI will take my job. You know, the common saying that, oh, AI will not take a job. It's the guy who knows AI. Well, that's the theory we want to test here. Like, do people who feel confident or competent in the use of AI, do they feel more secure in terms of their future, in terms of their livelihood? So these two questions could be very important questions that we could use, right? We could explore the relationship between individual self-efficacy in AI use and this. So this is what you have to go through at the beginning. Please do not relegate this part of the work to AI, because as you all know, as AI becomes more and more common, the work of science shifts from the hands to the brain, to the head. So our tasks are going to be increasingly more intellectual. So this is the part where you really want to say that research framing in a causal manner requires that you know what your exposure is and you know what your outcome is. So here we have identified our exposure as self-efficacy in using AI, my level of perceived confidence or competence in AI use. That is my exposure. My outcome here in this case is my concerns about AI taking my job in the future, right? So that is a key part of framing your research question in a causal manner. You have to know what is your exposure and what is your outcome. The next thing we want to know is these variables. What is the confounder? Because there are hundreds of variables in that data set. We need to know what we are looking for. It's not just a blind exercise where we just go there and say, okay, I like this variable. You don't select things by whether you like them or not. You select them by whether they fit into the causal framework. So let's quickly explain what these variables are so that we have a very solid understanding as we go into the data set back again to select our variables. So let's look at this simple analogy here. Imagine here that you are interested, you are playing a small experiment, and you're trying to say, how long does it take for water from this big tank to empty into this small green container? That is our research question, right? Now, if this was the only pipe available, this is the pipe we're interested in. We call this the causal pathway. If that was the only pipe that we had, we would not be worried. We'll just sit down and grab a drink and just put our timer on and calculate the time it takes for all the water from here to empty into this place. But that's not the case here. We don't have only one tank here. We have a lot of other pipes. We have this pipe, for example, that also starts from the tank and also goes all the way to the basin. This is what we call a confounder, right? So now, if you said that the time it took was 10 minutes, the question is, but that 10 minutes also accounts for this other pipe taking water from the same tank into the same basin, right? So a confounder is a variable that steals the shine of your main causal pathway. So now you're no longer sure that 10 minutes is just from the pink pipe or it's also from the white pipe, right? So confounders are like a thief. We call them nuisance variables because they're like a noisy neighbor. Imagine you're trying to have a conversation with a guest in your house and you have this extremely noisy neighbor making noise. Now you can no longer hear your guest very well because did you say no or did you say you know? I can't hear you very well because of this noisy neighbor. That's exactly what confounders do. They steal water from a tank and so you have to control for them, right? In research, we hear of things like we control for X, Y, and Z. Controlling simply means that we have to eliminate this pipe, right? So that it doesn't, because remember, all we're trying to do in research is to remain with only this pipe, get rid of all the other pipes. That's the only thing we're trying to do in research, right? So if the first pipe we have identified is a confounder, it's a variable that is associated with the exposure and with the outcome, but does not lie on the causal pathway, right? So this is the first variable we have to worry about. So let's map it back to our research question. In our question, we're interested in the relationship between your level of competency in AI use and the degree of fear you have about your future. So we have to ask ourselves, what variables are independently associated with your competence now and your fear for tomorrow? Well, we could think of things like your age, and we could think things like your education. Maybe you're very educated, you're more likely to have high competency in AI use, and you also feel you have proofing for the future. Because, how worried should you be? You can always find another job somewhere. So maybe you're not so worried, right? So that's how you want to be thinking, right? Again, at this point, we've not touched any tool yet. This is just us brainstorming about what do we want to explore in our research question. So the confounder is definitely a variable that we want to watch out for. And then we have other variables that we want to take care of. One is a mediator. A mediator is a variable that lies on the causal pathway. So imagine that this is the causal pathway we're interested in, the pink pipe. A mediator is just like another pipe that is inserted right inside the pink pipe. Well, guess what? The water was going to come here anyway. The water was coming all the way down here. All this mediator does is it just steals the water from here and makes it seem as though this pink pipe carried less water than it actually did. Because all the water that was supposed to come here, now some of it has been diverted here. And so that is not good, because our research question was just to focus on the pink pipe. So when you are selecting variables for your analysis, you want to make sure that you do not include variables that are intermediary variables in the causal pathway. In other words, if I am looking at the relationship between, let's say, physical inactivity and, let's say, diabetes, I don't want to include obesity as a control variable, because you don't exercise, you get obese, you develop hypertension. You can see that obesity is on that causal pathway, right? We need to know these variables so that when we're selecting our variables for analysis, we select the right variables and leave out the wrong variables. Now, another variable we need to understand is the covariate. Remember that our research question was, how long does it take for water from this tank to empty into the basin? We are interested in only one single pathway, which is this pink pipe. But guess what? We have a cloud here, which is also pouring water into the basin. Now, this extra water is not passing through the causal pathway, but we have to account for it, because if we don't account for it, you'll see that the basin is full, but not all that water came from the tank, right? So in research, a covariate is a variable that is associated with the outcome, but that's not necessarily, it's not associated with the exposure. This cloud here, the water from it is associated with the basin, but it didn't come through the pipe, through the tank here. We have to control for that too. Otherwise, we end up putting out spurious or false information and saying, oh, it took just 10 minutes for the tank to fill up the basin. But no, the water actually, some of that water came from the cloud. So we need to know these variables because they are key variables that influence our definition of the truth. Remember, research is all about identifying the truth and separating it from bias and from chance. All of these things we're talking about now boil down to sources of bias. What are things that end up telling us an answer that is not the true answer? Bias simply means systematic error, right? So let's now map it back to our data set. So again, remember, we're looking for, most importantly, confounders. Of course, we want to also take note of collinears. A collinear variable is a variable that is associated with the exposure, but not, it just repeats the information. Here, this small pipe here, it's not doing anything useful. It's just extending the pathway it takes for the water from this pink pipe to pour down here, right? Without this tank, this small thing here, we will still be fine. So why add this extra piece of information, right? It doesn't do anything. Instead, it complicates the messaging. So collinear variables are variables that we want to make sure we do not include. So the moral of the story is always include all confounders and remove mediators from the analysis. You want to remove variables that are collinear. So it's your job as the researcher to map out all these things. This is the most important thing you can do when you're developing a research, right? So here, let's go back to our paper, our brainstorming paper, and say, okay, this is our research question here. So what are potential confounders? So our confounders here could be age, obviously. It could be sex. Again, do this without looking at the data set. Map out all the variables that you think are confounders based on your subject matter knowledge. That I am an expert in the area of AI and occupational worry or concern. So based on my understanding, I think that these variables will be associated with the exposure and with the outcome, right? And again, this is you informing the choice. It's not that, oh, I read somewhere in some paper that age and sex. Something could be a confounder in somebody else's data set, but not in your own data set, not in your own context. So this is very contextual. So age, sex, maybe race, and so on, right? So that's what we do at this point. You brainstorm, or you ideate, and this is the most important task that you can do. No AI, no automation should do this for you, right? Because whatever you bring out at this stage is what will drive the rest of the process. Now let's go back to our data set, and now we can now bring the data set in and try to, map out those variables that we have identified. So we have identified our AI variables, right? We have identified some demographic variables in the data set to like age and sex, which would almost definitely be here. So let's now import our data sets and let's now start recoding. Recoding simply means recode. Re means to do over and over. Code is a value. Maybe when we import the data set, that will make more sense. But for now, we're done with this phase, which is just the brainstorming part. Now we're going to go to the data analysis and see how we can bring our variables into the form we want. So remember, we want a form where we have this level of proficiency. We want to have it as binary, yes or no. I am proficient in AI use or I am not proficient in AI use. But our data set may not be that way. It may be captured another way. And that's why we have to prepare the data set for analysis. That's why we do things like recode. Because when they collected the data sets or the data, they collected it in a very different way than we want to use it. So recode means, or data preparation means bringing the data set to the form that we need it to be for this particular research paper. So let's head over to the Chisquares platform. Let's import data. So again, remember these are the data files we had. Do not, again, I cannot emphasize enough, do not take a data set and try to analyze it without going through the data dictionary. Every data set has a data dictionary. So please, that's the very first point of call. And then the next is we'll now use the data file. There are two different files here. They're the same thing, just a different weight. PUF means person use file or public use file. And so we will now import that and get started with the analysis. So let's get over. So we're going to use the Chisquares platform for our research. The Chisquares platform is a one-stop shop for everything related to research. If you want to collect data, analyze data. So for today, we're going to use it for data analysis and manuscript writing. If you have an account, you can download the data set the same way we had here. Let me drop the link for you in case you want to follow along. Where do I drop a link? All right here. So you download the person use file and extract the data set, and we can follow along as we do the analysis. So if for those of you who are new, you can sign up. You have to log in, obviously, you have to sign up. So you sign up at this point here, and you create an account. If you have an account already, you simply just log in. So here, I want to analyze data, so I'm going to come to data analysis. I will start a new project, and I'll give my project a title. I'll call it Association Between, or just make it short, AI Use and Concerns and Job Concerns. You can put a description if you want. For now, I'm just going to skip that part and we'll proceed. So here, now I have to upload the data set. So I'm going to upload the data set that we just downloaded from the internet. This is the file. I'm going to import it So the file has been imported now. So before we go through any analysis, you always want to inspect data. So when you go to a doctor to have your illness, or maybe have a wound, doctors follow the IPPA. You inspect, right? Before you touch a wound or touch anything, you have to first use your eyes to inspect. Please, when it comes to data analysis, don't be in such a rush to. Yes, Lungile, you have your hands up.
Yes, sorry to disturb. So I just thought, okay, we'll take questions at the end of the session, but I thought you could explain this one. Why must one go to the data dictionary first before continuing with data analysis?
Okay. If we don't go to the data dictionary and we have a variable like this, AI22, like what does that mean? We don't know what that means, right? These names are nonsensical. They don't carry any meaning. So AI2_3, AI2_4, we don't know what these things are. But if we went to the data dictionary and we search for AI2, let's find and replace. Now we know that, oh, AI2_4 means the question, AI has changed my field of work, right? Again, remember we said we don't want to walk backwards. We want to, first of all, do our job as intellectuals, which is interact with the data, with the questionnaire, right? So here we don't have a questionnaire. The questionnaire is now buried inside the code book, right? So you have to make, that's why you have to, for you to formulate a research question, you obviously have to know what the raw questions are. So that's why we need to go through that first. It helps us know what's available and what's possible and what each question means. So you see AI12, AI24. So here, you know that this is let's go to the top of the column. So you see what each means. So which is what we just now. You have a variable label, which is a short description of what it means. You have a variable type, whether it's numeric or categorical. And then you have the values, the possible values. Very importantly, you also have the universe. Every code book will have the universe. The universe is who is eligible to answer that question. Some questions may be to only persons who are aged 18 years or older. Some may be to very specific segments of the population. If you do not read the code book, there's no way you're going to know what those things mean. So when you're analyzing the data set or writing the paper, you simply do not have that context. So that is why you have to read the code book, because it gives you the information that you need to provide context for the analysis. So I hope that is clear. All right, let's go back to our. So please, if we're going to establish a rule, the rule is do not try to analyze any data set, especially if it's publicly available data set, without first going through the codebook or the data dictionary. That should be the first step. Don't go to the data set first. No, that's the wrong approach. Go to the codebook, understand what those things mean, what the variables are, what you're interested in. It is then and only then that you can go to the data set. So you see what we did? We first of all went to the codebook, and then we had our notes. We created our notes of what we wanted to do, and now we can fully empowered go to the data set to make sense of everything, right? So now we have the variables here. We can now start creating the variables that we care about. So first of all, let's create a variable that has to do with, AI usage. So AI use was in that data set was defined by use for different things. So who uses AI, right? Or how do we define AI use? And that takes us to the second lesson of the day. You should feel empowered to define your variables however you want. So in other words, I want to create a binary variable for AI usage, right? How do you define it? Well, here we have questions that asked for different ways people use AI. Let's look for the AI question by Control F. So here, these are the questions here. In in the last 12 months, have you or anyone in your household used an AI tool for any of the following? And there are specific use cases asked of the individuals. For example, I've used it in a way that in an app. So this is the one that's an app. I've used it for brainstorming. I've used it for to assist with creative tasks. So one way we can define AI is to say AI use is say individuals who reported use of AI in at least one of the areas specified. That's one way. Another way is to just come here and say individuals who did not indicate refusal that they had not used AI, because we had one summary question here. Where is this again? This one here. In the last 2 months, have you or anyone in your household used an AI tool for any of the following? And the answer is no one in my household has used an AI tool in the last 2 months. So if we want to be maybe a bit lazier, we can say we're going to use this question. So anybody who answered yes to this question means they have not used AI. And anybody who did not answer yes means that they had used AI. All right. That's one way to do that. So for this approach, let's go to the lazy route and let's just create that. So again, remember we said that in this case, in this context, there are two ways we could have gone about it. We could have said, first option, you use AI for this, or you use AI for this, or you use AI for this. So that a series of all options. Or we just come here and say, okay, you've already told us that you have not used AI, so we're going to take that as the word of truth. So let's just, for the sake of just time, we're going to use that option. But you want to be don't go for the easier option. All right, always go for the more rigorous option in creating your variables. But these are choices that you, as the researcher, will have to make. Writing the manuscript is full of making choices. So this is one of the choices. How am I going to create my variables? So here, let's come to this variable. The variable we're using is this one here. No one in my household has used AI. So this is AI 1_8. So we're going to define individuals who have used AI as, if they answered in the affirmative, we're going to say they have not used AI. If they answered the opposite way, we'll say they have used AI. So let's demonstrate that. So remember, we're taking note of this number, AI 1_8. So here we're trying to recode AI 1_8. That's the variable. So you can see how it is impossible to analyze the data without a codebook. How are you going to know what AI 1_8 means? You can't. There's no way of knowing it unless you refer back to the codebook. So here we want to, the values are 1 and -99, right? What does -99 means? Well, you go back to the codebook and you see the values. The values means question seen, but category not selected. It means that the person saw the question, but did not answer that. So in other words, these are the people who have used AI in the past 2 months. So we're going to recode this variable. So we'll select this option and click on recode. So there are two options here. One are the people who said, I have used AI. I have not used AI in the past 2 months. -99 are people who saw that option but did not select it, which we are assuming. Now, take note that there are a lot of assumptions that we make in research when we analyze data. You have to clearly write down your assumptions. This is what we mean by transparency in research. So we are assuming that people who did not select that option means that, yes, they have used AI. It's a reasonable assumption, and we're going to use it. So we would edit this label. These individuals, we're going to put them as individuals who used, so let's start with this one here. 1 and those who selected that they have not used AI. So we're going to edit this and call them zeros. And these ones, we're going to edit the label and assign them a value of 1. So we have created a variable 0 and 1, and the name of a variable is any AI use. So any AI use. So this is our variable here. or if you want to make it short, when giving variable names, try not to make it too long. Variable names should be short, there should be something that you can come back in a week, 2 weeks, and still remember what that is all about. So here we have created any AI use, and now we will just proceed. In this case, all we had to do was just change create 0 and 1, right? So in working with dataset, one way of simplifying analysis is to always try and create binary variables 0 and 1. 0 is intuitive as no, 1 is intuitive as yes. We call this Booleans, or Boolean variables or binary variables, however you want to call it. So now we can proceed, and now we have created our variable, our first variable, which is an AI usage. Do you use AI in the past 2 months, or do you not? Right. Now, we also wanted to look at specific questions on AI productivity. So remember that going forward, all our analysis will be among individuals who have used AI. Why? Because when you're analyzing data, you want to make sure that you define your study population. Let's look at this. So a very key part of doing any research is to define what we call PHIRu, or the PHIRu. P is your population, I is the intervention, C is the comparison, O is the outcome, T is the time, and S is study design. Let's map it to our research question here. Our population is US adults who, aged 18 years or older, who reported AI usage in the past 12 months. There's no point talking about AI usage or concern about AI use or AI productivity among somebody who has not used AI. So the population means that all your analysis will be done among that group. So this is part of the things you want to jot down. What is my P? What's my I? What's my C? And so on and so forth. So our population is, in this case, is adults who reported AI use. That's why we created that indicator for AI use or none, right? 1 or 0. So going forward, all our analysis will be among those with 1, right? So these individuals here, let's visualize it. All our analysis will be among the 4,779 individuals who have a value of 1. Why? Because that's our study population. Why? Because we decided, you as the investigator can decide what your population is. You don't have to go and ask somebody else that, what should my population be, right? You're the one who's doing the research. You should be able to answer that question yourself. So your population can be whatever you decide it to be, right? So here we have decided that our analysis will be limited to individuals who reported AI usage within the past 2 months. Now, the intervention or the exposure is whether they have self-efficacy towards AI use, whether they feel confident in using AI or not. So in other words, we're going to have to create another binary variable for I feel confident about using AI, or I don't feel confident about using AI, right? That's our comparison, and that's also the intervention. So intervention and the comparison here are implicit, they're implied. The outcome is worry about the future. I'm worried about that AI will take my job, right? Again, we want to make that binary 0 and 1. So let's recode those variables before we go further. So let's first of all look for our exposure. We said our exposure variable here is the confidence or competency I have towards AI. So let's look for the question that had that variable. So we had, I think it was the next set of questions. AI tools make me more productive. AI has changed my field of work. I feel prepared. Yeah, I like this one here. I feel, where is the stuff I just selected now? Let's highlight it. Right here. I feel prepared to use AI at work. This is a very good question as a marker for self-efficacy. Now, you don't have to use this, right? You as a researcher can choose to, you can frame your question anyhow you want. I just want to use this as the investigator. I like the question. I have a theory behind it. It's something that people have said anecdotally that I want to test empirically. So let's recode this variable. The question here is AI2_6. I feel prepared to use AI at work. So let's go to our data set. We'll search for AI, I believe AI1_2. I believe it was. Let's verify. AI2_6, that's completely wrong. AI2_6. So that's the question. Again, you always be going back and forth between your data set and your code book. Don't assume. That's rule number 3 for research. Don't make any assumptions about anything. Don't assume that, oh, I think I know what this variable is. No, you don't. Always go back to the code book and make sure that you have confirmed what you think you know. So here, our variable here is AI2_6. I feel prepared to use AI at work. What are the values? Let's check. Number 1 is yes, that I feel prepared. Then the values of 99 minus 99 are no, I don't feel prepared. So let's recode this. So 1 is yes. This and this, we're going to combine them together and edit the label to assign them a value of 0. So to recode a variable, all you have to do is just drag. If you want to combine 2 categories, just drag and drop. So we have 1 and 0. Again, remember that all our analysis will be limited to only those who said, yes, I used AI in the question we created earlier. So we're going to call this variable AI prepared. Always try to have a consistent nomenclature for how you name your variables. It's always easy to find out a way. So all questions about AI, I would just call them, append AI in front so that it's easy for me to detect them. You don't have to do it's not a must, obviously, but it's just good data hygiene. So AI prepared, we've created a binary variable here. And so we've created our second variable. Then our outcome variable was fear about concerns about AI taking your job in the future. So let's look for the variable that has to do with this. It's this one here. I'm worried about AI's impact on my career. Well, they didn't exactly say it's going to take my job, but we can infer that. The question here is AI2_8. So AI2_8. See, how do I have a feeling that was the last one I recorded? Okay, yes, 2_8. And if you have a sense that you did not do something right, you can always go to analysis history and verify the variables that you did. The analysis history can also help you look at the details of what you did. So we can view the details. So this tells me that the last variable I recorded was AI2_6. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So now I know that, okay, I was not hallucinating, right? I can always go back and validate that, yes, indeed, this was the variable that I analyzed, and I'm not just, imagining or hearing voices. So let's record the next variable here, which is AI2_8. I'm worried about AI's impact on my career. So let's go to the AI2_8, and let's record it exactly the same way. Recode. So again, this and this. So we'll just drag and drop. And we'll edit the label to call this 0. So 1 means I am worried about AI impacting my career negatively. 0 means otherwise. And I'm going to call this AI fear. Give names that are obvious, that you don't have to start worrying about, what does this actually mean? So feel free to give very descriptive names that will make you remember what you're talking about. So we've created AI fear. So again, the three key variables that we need for our causal framework, we've created the outcome variable. And now we have to look for variables that may be confounders of that relationship, right? And also there are also other variables here that will be good for us to include for just descriptive analysis, right? When we tell a story, we always try and fill in details. It's that context. So there are lots of variables here that are not necessarily exposure variables or outcome variables, but are very important to tell the whole story. So things like what are people using AI for? You know, is that different when it's students versus non-students? Those are like interesting questions that we can also explore. So let's look at some of those use cases. So I control when I use AI, that's AI2 underscore 2, AI2 underscore 2, which is I control when I, let's put this in color. When I'm working with data, I think it's always good practice to use Excel. I think Excel is an excellent tool for that. You can always mark things and track things. And so, and it also helps when you have two screens. Like I have two screens, so I will put the code book in one screen, and then I'll put the other tool I'm using for analysis in another screen, so I can look at two things simultaneously without having to keep going back and forth. All right, so so here we have I control when I use AI. Again, we can recode. Now, when you're recording, you don't have to do it one by one by one. You can enable batch recode here, so that you can then select all the variables that look like that you want to record that way, and select all of them, so that you just do it once. You don't have to start doing it manually a whole bunch of times. But in this case, I'm just going one by one so that we can all follow through. But I'm just showing that when you're doing it on your own, you can enable batch recode and do it for many variables at the same time. So for now, I'm just going to disable this. So again, we want to, this is 1, so edit label, this is 0, and this is 1, and AI2 underscore 2 was, I control AI. So AI control, that's a variable, that's just a descriptive variable. Then another descriptive variable is this one. I control how my data is used by AI, AI2 underscore 3. Again, this part of the work, you should not rush it. Take your time. This is the most important part of the work, right? Creating the research question, creating the variables, getting your data set in that form, right? So don't be at the rush to finish. It's not a race. So take your time and do it well. It's better to do it well than do it fast, you know. So here, again, we record this variable and drop, edit. And remember, you can do this in bulk. We're just doing it one by one so that repetition will cement itself. And this is AI, let's just call it AI privacy. In other words, I can control, I have control over my privacy. So that we don't confuse with the other one, AI control from earlier. And then the next variable is AI has changed my field of work. That's an important one. AI2 underscore 4. We'll again recode. We're going to drag this and this. We're going to change this 0. And AI field. You know, AI has changed my field, or AI has, let's call it disruptive. Well, maybe not disruptive, sounds negative, but that's how I can remember it. So I'm just recording it for myself, right? So AI has been disruptive, or AI has changed my career. So we're going to put that. Next, the next variable is I trust information from AI, AI2 underscore 5. I think one of the benefits of doing it one by one is that it forces you to engage with the questionnaire, with the codebook, so that as opposed to doing it in batch mode. Again, remember, at this point of writing the paper, it's all about getting it right. So don't do anything in batch mode if you're not sure of what you're doing. It's better to do it slow and get it right than do it in batch, get it fast, but it's just nonsensical. So let's recode this. AI2 underscore 5 is I trust information from AI. So again, clearly a lot of trust issues with AI here. Edit label, this is 0. And we're going to call this AI trusts. Then we've talked about this, we've talked about this. Now let's look at basic demographic variables. So we are done with our core variables for our primary outcome and our secondary outcomes. So in this case, our primary outcome was, I am worried about AI's impact on my career. In research, you can only have one primary outcome. If you have many other things you're interested in, those can become your secondary outcomes. So we have identified our primary outcome, which is, I am worried about AI's impact on my career. We've identified our secondary outcomes, which are the ones we just created now. I feel prepared to use AI and all of that. And then we have our exposure, which is how competent you are. Then, obviously, we have to look for confounders. Confounders, remember, variables associated with the exposure and with the outcome, but do not rely on the causal pathway. And from our notes, we said those were things like age and sex and race and so on and so forth. Where are my notes again? Yeah, so those are the things we identified as confounders. At this point, just worry about identifying them based on common sense. We'll test them statistically later. All of those things about tests and the nuances, those can be automated. For now, we're just asking you, use your common sense as a researcher and identify the variables that you think are associated with exposure and outcome. That's why you're the expert. You are the subject matter expert. You're the researcher. You should know those things, right? And that's why AI cannot replace you, because you are bringing your context and your expertise to do things that AI cannot do. The AI does not know context. All right, so now let's create our demographic variables, things like age and sex. So let's look for them here. So let's Control F, age, if that exists. So again, this will take time, obviously, because I have to read through the whole questionnaire and identify what the things are. So for now, I'm just going to look for a few variables, just a handful, for the sake of demonstration, and would recode them accordingly. So let's look. Demographic variables in general are always at the extreme of a questionnaire. They're always either at the beginning or at the end or both. So if you don't know, and you're in a rush, always, I always start at the end. So we have things like your location, metro status, whether you're in an urban or rural area. That's a good question. So this is the metropolitan statistical area. That is whether you live in a rural area or an urban area, which is a great question for us to explore. So here, does the individual live in an urban area? Yes or no? We're going to capture that. Then there are questions like, how many people over 18 years old live in your household? When you see a question you like, you have to, again, subject it through that causal framework. Is this variable likely to be associated with the exposure? Is it likely to be associated with the outcome? And does it lie on the causal pathway, right? That's the basic litmus test you're going to have to use. So let's capture sexual orientation. Let's capture age. Let's capture race, ethnicity. So we're going to capture those variables here as our potential confounders. Then education level, that's great. We're going to use that as well. So here we have, and then obviously sex. So let's quickly recode those variables and use them for the analysis. And then, this is important. Income level, marital status. Obviously, you can imagine that if you don't have money, you won't be able to afford tokens, right? So that's clearly a confounder. AI use and AI competencies are all about how often you use it. And if I don't have money to pay for AI, well, I may not be able to use it frequently. And concern about the future. If I have a lot of money in my accounts, maybe I'm not so worried about my future job, right? So that's clearly a confounder of the relationships. So let's recode those variables and income. So let's start with this. Income, the variable name is rfarm income. So come here is rfarm income. So again, you can see why the code book is very important. So let's recode. Without a code book, you won't know what 1 means or 2 means. It's going to sound like just gibberish to you. The code book gives the data life. So now we know what 1 and 2 mean. So 1 and 2, and we can always collapse things together if there are categories that are few. So here, for example, we have 838 individuals in category 1, which is less than 25K. So let's start giving them names. Edit this. I will call this less than 25K. Again, when you give categories, make sure that it's something you will understand. So here in my mind, I know that L means less, G means greater, or whatever. But again, you show something descriptive that you can understand. Then category 2 is 25 to 34,000. Alternatively, I can choose to collapse this, and this into one category and say, these are the people who earn less than $50,000 as their annual household income. So let's do that instead. Collapse this, and this. So just simply click the ones you want to combine and merge them together. And that's our category here. So these are people who earn between less than 50,000. So we're going to call this category less than 50K. So we have created our first category. Then next, we have individuals who earn 50 to 74K, and then those who earn 75 to 99. So maybe we can combine 4 and 5. Now, as the researcher, you have the choice to decide how you want to collapse it. So you don't have to go and ask somebody else, oh, how should I collapse it? Well, you can collapse it however you want. Now, there's some things you want to pay attention to, obviously. You want to see the sample size, like the numbers here. Are they large enough to support a group, right? You don't want a group that is has too few people in it. So, so we're combining 4 and 5 together into one group. So this is 4 and 5 combined, and we'll call this people who earn between 50 to 90K, 90 to 99K. So let's edit the label. So between 50 to 99K, right? So I'm putting I have a standardized way. You can come up with however way you want to rename your variables, but this is how I have chosen to rename my categories. So I've combined, and then the next one is maybe those who earn 6 and 7, those who are earning $100,000 or higher. So this is 6 and 7. I'm going to drag, combine, edit label. So this is over 100K combined. They have individual minus 99 is individuals who saw the question but did not answer it. So we can just either choose to drop them as missing values, or just rename them as other, or no response. However you want to do it. And now we have our variable on income, and we'll create it. So that's how you recode. So we've created our income variable. Next, we also want to create our variable on gender, male and female. So in this case, 1 is male, 2 is female. So the variable is called esex1. esex1. So again, recode. 1 is male. Always for categorical variables, please don't leave values like 1 and 2. Always give them a label so you know what I mean. Edit the label. 1, I've probably forgotten what 1 means. So 1 is male. And if you forgot, always go back and check. Don't assume. 1 is male and 2 is female. The platform always, if you give labels that are descriptive, the platform will automatically assign colors that are very playful. So now male is blue and female is pink. I will call this, let's call this gender. Actually, sex, since it's talking about at birth. So next we have educational level, and we can also find ways of collapsing. Data analysis is all about reducing data. It's about have to take this big thing and make it smaller so that we can understand it more. That's what we do recode. So here we can say we want to recode such that we have individuals. Let's first of all look at the variable and see what we have available. So the variable is redoc 1, redoc 1, yes. This is it right here. Let's recode. So we're recoding. So you can see that this, so your choice of recoding or your decision to record should be driven by the numbers. So you can see that here you have this group that just has 16 people in it, right? Clearly, you want to collapse it with something else. So 1 here, less than grade school, less than high school diploma. We definitely want to combine these two together. And it will call individuals with less than high school. So let's edit the label and call it less than high school. Less than high school. Next, we have number 3 means you have a high school graduate or equivalent, and it's best to keep that one as itself because that's an important category. So we're going to call this high school. Just you have completed high school. The next one is 4, some college, but degree is not received or is in progress. Now, from an AI perspective, that's a very important group because when you're trying to look at research among college students. In fact, you can do your whole analysis and among only this group. Like your research could just focus on AI usage patterns among college students. And this is an excellent question because you already have a category that explicitly tells you those who are currently enrolled in college but have not yet gotten their degree. They're still working towards getting their degree. So these are the kind of things you want to be thinking about when you're exploring a questionnaire. Like how does this play beautifully into what I'm trying to explore? So here, let's look at the sample size, whether we have a lot of people there. Yes, we have a lot of people, 1,204. So let's put this as in college. So in college, or let me just call it enrolled. So they're enrolled in college. Then the next one is 5, associate's degree. We have that's enough people there. So let's gonna keep it different. Associate degree. Associate degree, for those who may not be familiar with that term, is people who have earned it's a degree that is not up to 4 years. So you have like 2 years. So that's what an associate degree is. And since it's quite different from a typical 4-year degree, those are quite different people. So we want to keep them separate. So in general, we don't want to combine apples and oranges, right? That's the rule of thumb we want to keep in mind when we're recording. So associate degree. Then number 6 is bachelor's degree and 7 is college degree. This have enough people, so we can keep them separate. So 6, edit label, bachelor's. And 7 is postgraduate, PG, right? And we can call this new variable education, or educ, or however you want to call it. One of my favorite things I like giving, when I'm creating my variables for research, I give a name and I put the number of categories it has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll call it, for example, educ 6. Just so when I just look at the variable name, I know that, oh, this has 6 categories. You can come up with whatever convention you have for your own personal preferred approach to doing these things. So we have education. The next variable is race. So we're going to record race. So we have 2 more variables that we want to, so race is here, RR. So this is race, I believe. Yes, this is it here. So we're going to recode. So here, white alone, 1 is white. So let's edit label. This is white. 2 is Hispanic. So edit label, Hispanic. 3 is Black. 4 is Asian. 5 is other race. And with the name as race, ethnicity, and proceed. Then we have sexual orientation, sex orient, and then let's see which other variable we want. I think that's the last one, I believe. And I think it would be nice to also include urban or rural status. So this is also a variable that we should explore. This one right here. So coming back to that in a minute. And the reason why we want to make sure we capture this variable is because, yeah, people who are in rural areas, that's a clear confounder. Individuals who are in rural areas may have less self-efficacy to using AI. But maybe they're not so worried also about AI taking their jobs, right? Because of where they live or the kind of work they do. So we want to capture that. So let's recode the last two variables that we have. Sexual orientation, the variable is sex orient. So sex underscore orientation, edit. So I want to recode this. And here, one is gay, edit label. So one is gay. Two is straight. So I hope we can all understand why the codebook is so important. You cannot do research without going into the codebook because, like, otherwise you can be guaranteed that what you're doing makes no sense. You know, three is bisexual. Now, these variables are very important because, you know, your research should be as inclusive as possible, right? So that's why variables like this have become very important because you capture things in a way that captures the society we live in. Four is, I use a different term, other. And then 89 means that they do not answer or they refuse to answer. So edit label, refuse. And we can call this sexual orientation. Of course, we already have a variable called sex, so we won't be allowed to give another variable called sex. Sex orients. And then lastly, our last variable here is whether you live in a rural or urban, you know, whether you live in a metropolitan area. One, if you do, no, if you don't. So that's the question here. So let's check for metro status. Metro. Let's recode. So one is those who live in urban, and zero is those who live in rural. And we'll call this rural or urban, or whatever, it doesn't matter, but make sure that it's something you can remember. All right, we've done with the hardest part of the job. Now we've created all the variables we need for our paper. So these are all the variables we've created. You can see all of them here. These are categorical variables, these are binary variables, and so on. Now we have to, now the easy part, now is the easy part. Now we can now create an analysis plan and execute the analysis. Now, the analysis wizard is where it allows you, helps you to create an analysis plan for analysis. So here we'll come to analysis wizard and we'll come to the analysis suggester. Whenever you want to do analysis, you must always have a plan. The plan will be, oh, this is the table shells. This is how the tables are going to look like. On the platform, we'll just give you a tool that helps you with making that plan. So it's faster for you. So come to analysis suggester. I will now we'll now plug in all the variables that we just created. Again, at this point, with the hardest part of the work is done, which was coming up with the research question, the ideation, the selection of variables, the creation of variables. Those are things that you as a researcher should do by yourself, right? Now we want to create the plan for the analysis. So it says, choose the outcome. We only have one outcome, which is fear about the future. We select that, that's a binary variable. Then our secondary outcomes. Our secondary outcomes are all the other AI variables that we AI underscore, whether they feel in control with the privacy, whether they find AI to be disruptive, whether they trust AI. We could select those as our secondary outcomes here. Let me make this smaller so I can click on done specifying. So this is a primary outcome. I'm worried about AI taking my job in the future. The secondary outcomes are other outcomes that are equally important to me, but not as important as the primary outcome. Take note, you can only have one primary outcome in the study. If you have many outcomes you're interested in, all the other ones should become your secondary outcomes. The job of a secondary outcome is to provide coherence. All roads lead to Rome. So if all roads lead to Rome, if I'm seeing the same story across all the other secondary outcomes, then I know that, the story makes sense. So we selected our primary outcome. This is our secondary outcome. Now we have to select our primary exposure. Remember, we are using a causal framework. A causal framework says, what is your exposure? This is a causal framework. What's my exposure? What's my outcome? You can only have one primary exposure. You cannot have 10 primary exposures. One. If you have 10 of them, that becomes a fishing expedition. That's no longer a causal framework, right? You can also only have one primary outcome, right? So the platform is designed to support you in coming up with a causal framework for your research. That's why you can only have one primary outcome and you can only have one primary exposure. My primary exposure here is AI prepared, whether I feel prepared in terms of AI usage, which is there. And then next, all the demographic variables that I have, which are urban status, sexual orientation, race, education, income level, sex, those are the demographic variables. So all I've done now is selected my primary exposure, my outcome, my secondary outcomes, my main exposure, and the demographics. And now I can ask the platform to suggest analysis for me, which it has. So the platform now says that your manuscript should have 4 tables here. Table 1 should be population characteristics of the analyzed population. Table 2 should be stratified prevalence estimates for categorical outcomes. And it has outlined the tables. Table 3 should be this. Table 4 should be associations between AI prepared and AI fear in analyzed population, controlling for this. So my job now is to simply just run the analysis. So I'm going to click on this and then run. Now, let's click on run this analysis. Now, before we run the analysis, very, very important point. When we're using large national surveys, like the household pulse survey, you want to be very careful to make sure you do the analysis correctly. I cannot emphasize this enough. In each large survey, you're going to see a variable like this. You see P weight. This is the weight. A weight variable is used in large surveys to ensure that the results are valid, right? A weight, for example, means that, let's look at the weight variable here. Let me quickly minimize this. I will come back to that in a minute. But this is so, so important that I have to mention it. So if you look at this variable here, or let's look at the spreadsheet first. Let's look at the data in spreadsheet mode to see what the weight variable looks like. So P weight was, what was it called now? I think it was called, the end of a data set. Okay, right. This is it. If you pick a data set from the public domain, you really want to read the documentation to verify whether it has weights or not. A weight variable tells us, like this weight, 5068, this tells us that this guy in this row represents 5,068 people like them. This person means this person represents 2,990 people. So once you're doing analysis where everybody does not have the same probability of selection, you must, capital letters underlined, must account for that design, right? That is why sometimes people are afraid of analyzing large publicly available data sets. On the Kairos platform, it's pretty easy. To account for the weights, we'll simply come to our, where's my analysis again? Okay, we'll come to the analysis mode and we'll set the weight by selecting the weight variable. We'll select that. If there's a PSU variable, I will have a session on PSU in the future, but for now, this data set only has a weight. So I'm going to select that weight variable, and that's all I have to do. Now you can see that the analysis mode is weighted. From now going forward, the platform will automatically account for the design or the weights. So that is an extremely important step that you must take. So let's resume to analysis. So for each of analysis we want to do, all we need to do is just click on run this analysis. And we will have to then specify the population. Are we analyzing for the entire data set, or are we analyzing for a subset of the data? So in this case, we are only analyzing the data among people who have used AI. So we can edit this, say we want to analyze a subset and say this will be among people who have used AI. So AI use, if value of AI use is exactly equal to 1, that is our study population. And so here, there are 4,779 people who meet that definition. So we can now estimate. And now the platform has performed the analysis for the table. We have the table here, we have the plot. We have, for every analysis the platform does, it automatically writes out the results for you. So you have the results, and now we can just push to our results, our manuscript. So actions, push results to the manuscript. We don't have the manuscript yet, so let's create a new manuscript. It's an academic manuscript. Let's give it a title, association between AI self-efficacy and concerns about future job losses among US adults. So that's our, again, our topic, our aim. Now, for the first time, we're going to use AI. So far, all we've done, AI has not been involved. But for small things that don't come in contact with data, we use AI. So our framework is that anything that touches data cannot use AI. Analysis, recode, anything that is involving data should not be used, should not touch AI, because AI, there are privacy concerns. AI can make mistakes. Obviously, we don't want that. But for small things like, oh, generate aim. Yeah, sure, we're going to use AI for that. AI will suggest aims for our paper, and we can select any aims that we want, or you can also type it yourself, and we can now create our document, and we can now push the results to this document. So we did analysis, we've pushed the results, we can view the documents if we want, but we can also choose to stay behind and perform the other analysis. So we've done this, we've pushed this one here. Next, we can also look at stratified prevalence estimates. Again, all we have to do is click on run this analysis, specify the subset, which is, individuals who reported any use of AI. So if AI use is exactly equal to 1, remember we're analyzing the data among people who reported using AI. So again, we estimate. The platform does analysis for us. This is the result. It writes the results for you, creates figures for you automatically. So you don't have to worry about, geez, how do I write this thing out? And again, none of this is AI. And all we have to do is push the results to our manuscript. So that's why I said earlier that the hardest part is you thinking about the manuscript. The task of performing the analysis and writing the results and pushing them, that's easy. And then before we go and view the document, let's run one more analysis. Let's run the last one that was suggested, which was our regression analysis. Again, run this analysis. This is a regression analysis. So again, we want to analyze among the subsets of people who use AI. So AI underscore use, if they are users. And we perform the regression. So again, we have the plot. Platform gives you a forest plot. So you can see, just by looking, how people who, degree of, relationship between the different variables of interest and the outcome of interest here. And the text is also created automatically for you. And again, you can push results to the manuscript, which is this. And let's go and view the document now that we've pushed so many results there. So the hard part of the work is not the doing the analysis or the writing, it's the ideation, the beginning, where you have to really rethink through everything. And because, every other thing can be automated. The platform can automate analysis and the writing of the text. Those are mechanical tasks. The real intellectual task is that beginning task of making sense of the research question. And, so here, the platform has pushed the the content we have. As it pushes content, it automatically rearranges it in the order in which it is supposed to be, the order in which science should read. So we have the tables have been pushed with the figures. These are our tables that we just created now. And now we can generate the remaining parts of our paper, like the methods. So let's click the methods and generate them. What was the study design? This was a cross-sectional study. What ages were eligible? This was among persons aged 18 years or older. So we're going to say from this group. Then is what was study setting? This was a household-based survey. Actually, it wasn't. It was a web-based survey. How were participants selected? They were selected with stratified sampling. How were the data collected? They were collected as online surveys. What was the setting? This was in the United States. So here, all the platform is saying is answer these questions, and we will take the information you've provided and write it into a manuscript, into a methods section. So you provide the information, the platform takes all of that information and generates a coherent methodology section, just something concise, and we can now push to the manuscript. The focus is on that section being complete. So we've added that part. The introduction, again, for those other parts of manuscript that do not have to do with data, the platform allows you to use AI. And there are two ways you can use AI. There is the AI first approach, which means that I will just simply click, and that's it. The platform will take the context for the manuscript that I have provided so far, and it will then generate an introduction for me to then edit. So it's called AI first because AI does the work first, and then you, the human being, can then edit the work subsequently. Versus the alternative, which is the human first, where the human creates inputs. So here, AI has given me this draft of what it thinks is a compelling introduction for the work. I can edit here, I can make changes, or I can just push the manuscript and make changes from there. So I have my introduction, I can edit it like this. The methods and the rest of the manuscript follows accordingly. But the same thing will apply to let's say, the discussion, right? You can also have an AI first approach where we just say, all right, AI, you already know the results, you already know the context. Take that and create a compelling discussion for me, and then I will edit it later. If you wanted to go through the AI, the human first approach, then you will have to provide the inputs, and then the AI system would then take your inputs and generate that section. It's up to you as a user how you want to go about it. And so this I can push there, and then the same thing with limitations. I can again have an AI first approach where it takes the context and finds the limitations there, and then I can edit it later. The same thing again with the conclusion, and have an AI first approach where the AI takes the context, generates the content, and then I can edit it later. So again, all of these things are up to you. You can choose to, type or use whichever approach you want. Those are choices that you make as a researcher. Now, after you're done with your documents, you want to clean up the documents. You can see that things like AI privacy or AI trust, those are not names that are intuitive. So the cleanup process allows you to supply the names of the variables, actual names that make sense. So here I can say urban means living in an urban area, and so on and so forth. And when I'm done, I can submit, and the platform will then do the whole cleanup. So since we're short of time, I won't go into all those details, but there's one important thing that I have to point out, which is the references. How do you manage references on the platform? So you come to citation, and this is where you can cite. So you don't need a separate tool for citation. The reason why we also don't automatically add citations for you is to force you to read the document. I mean, for you to cite something, that means you have read through it. So, so you can search through here on any topic. The platform is connected to all the major databases. So when you put a search through here, it pulls the literature from all those places. And you can actually go and read from source. You can click on the read from source to go and read from the original document. So these are all legitimate sources. They're not AI generated. Again, this is data. So our principle is AI cannot touch anything that has to do with data. So if you want to cite any part of work, you just click on cite, and the platform will cite it at where you have clicked, and you can then have both the inline citation here and the reference at the end of the work. So now, also very important, whenever you use AI on the platform automatically creates an AI usage statement. So this statement says, this research utilized AI tools on the Chisquares platform for light copy editing and so on and so forth. All AI-generated content was meticulously reviewed by you, the researcher, and you take full accountability for its work. Then, very importantly, the Chisquares platform does not employ AI for data analysis, for management of references, writing the results, or anything that has to do with data. And so, so that's the AI statement, and of course, you can edit it. So that's how manuscript writing on the Chisquares platform goes. Obviously, we just had limited time, and this was more of a very high-level view. But I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. And thanks, everyone. We appreciate the reactions. If you have any questions, please post them on the chat box. And if you've posted questions earlier, I may have missed them because there's quite a lot of text already on the chat box. So please share your questions, post them again. They're asking for the full manuscript. Prof.
Well, you already have a data set, right? So this again, that's the beauty of it, right? There's so much data that if you wanted, you could literally write 10 manuscripts a year if you wanted to. The limit is you, because there's so much data sets available. The limit is your imagination, your ability to come up with meaningful research questions from the midst of all of that. So yeah, you can definitely access the link. I think I already shared the link to the file. So you can definitely think around and say, okay, how will you? And even that question we just explored, that 1,000,001 ways you could explore it. How does AI use among college students? How does degree of preparedness for the future differ among those who use AI versus those who do not use AI? What are economic disparities in AI usage? Or and how does, for example, that 1,000,001 ways, we could spend the whole day talking about possible research questions, and this is just one single data set. And then you have tons of other data sets that are out there that you could also explore.
Thank you, Prof. What I like the most, what strikes me the most, is how much time you spent on preparation of the data set, and the manuscript writing itself was just like a few minutes, because I myself, I was looking at the time and I was like, whoa, how are we doing? How much longer are we going to spend? So yeah, that's quite very interesting from everything that's been done here. Thank you. Those who are asking for the recording, I'm posting our YouTube link. So the session is live on YouTube and you can watch it even after the session. Thank you. Okay, now I'm looking for, can we get communications? Okay, please post your questions. Okay, how is this review done on the, how is literature review done on the platform?
So when you click on citation here, so once you come here, it come automatically, it's searching for references that align with the topic. So before you even click anything, the platform has already pulled hundreds of references for you, depending on the topic. But you can also search here. You can say tobacco control in Africa, for example, right? And you search. What happens is that the platform pulls references from PubMed, Web of Science, and every other database that is out there and displays it for you. So you don't have to say, okay, I have to go to PubMed, I have to go. No, you can do every single thing from the platform. if you want to read a particular work from the main source, or let's say download a PDF, you can just click on read from source, and it's going to take you to the original source of that information that was pulled. And then you can download the PDF from there and so on.
Thanks, Prof. My question is, how do I go through the same process to write manuscripts from my PhD thesis?
You practice. You go online, you watch the video, and you practice all over.
Are there demo data sets for our use and for publishing too?
Yes, the demo data sets, I just pulled them from the internet too. They're all publicly available data sets. So you can do whatever you want with them. This was just an example to demonstrate so that we had a real use case, not just something simplistic.
Thank you. Amazing session. Please address effect of this activity on academic AI detection and Turnitin scores. Can this be used reliably for medical or clinical research? Can one use it to independently submit to journals without an academic institution affiliation?
Yes, you can use all of that. The platform does not, again, like I said earlier, you don't even have to use AI for the platform. All of the things we looked at about, analysis and all of those AI is not involved. So it's like using Python or using R or using any other software, right? And also for the part of in the introduction, for example, the process is very probabilistic. So there's no kind of content sitting where we just take the content and put in your work. It's done in real time and it's probabilistic. And of course, ultimately, it's your job as a researcher to make sure that the text that is final is yours. So, that's a very important point I want to emphasize, right? So you can't say, oh, this is what the platform gave me, so it has to be the final. No. This is version 1, not the final version. It's your job to sit down and say, you know what? I'm going to cancel all of this part and just write something else, that I want to write. Yeah, that's your job as a researcher, is to make sure that the final content is truly yours. So the question of, so it's like using a Word document, like, so it's not so much about, oh, I will blame my plagiarism on Word document. That makes no sense because you're a researcher. This is just a tool to allow you to be able to generate manuscripts, but ultimately the responsibility for the integrity of manuscript lies at your feet.
Thank you, Prof. Does Chi-Squares have a mobile app like Kobo or ODK?
No, but it's web enabled, so you can browse the app too, but there's no app like going into the App Store, at least not for now.
Okay, how do we get the data sets in the Chi-Squares, and does it capture other countries like Nigeria?
The data sets, you will bring your data sets to the platform. As a researcher, it's the first thing you have to worry about is which data set am I using? It's like when you analyze data in R does not automatically give you data sets, right? You bring your data. So that's what the platform here does too. You bring your data sets for analysis. And so your first task is to determine what my research question is and where am I going to get the data for that research question. That's your job as a researcher. So no platform can help you in that regard.
Thank you. How does one subscribe to the Chi-Squares platform? And what are the costs? So you can just visit our website, www.chi-squares.com, create an account, and there are different options. Some require payment. It's a freemium model. So you can pay for more advanced analysis, and you can still use the platform for free at no cost to you. So just create an account, www.chi-squares.com, and create a profile and just get started. Okay. Can we use the platform to test hypotheses?
Well, that's just what we did now, right?
Okay, I'm looking for more questions. Sorry, I was scrolling up. Okay. May I kindly ask what database you can suggest for clinical research?
Well, clinical research is a broad term that there's no one database that can be recommended, because it depends on what you're looking at. Having said that, there are lots of data sets that have a lot of clinical endpoints. Like you can look at NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. You can look at PRFSS that has questions on self-reported diagnosis of a lot of conditions. So again, it's simple. If you do a simple search on ChatGPT, I'm sure it's going to pull up a lot of data sets that would be relevant to your research question.
Thank you. Which types of data are freely available for use on the internet, and how can one access it?
You can do a search for that, and you'll see, it depends on the topic of interest. So there's no specific answer to that question. But again, the same way we searched at the beginning and went through a process, that's also just model what you can also do to access data sets depending on the topic you're interested in.
Can we use cross-sectional data to carry out a study on causal inference? Aren't we going to consider following up the study respondents?
If you have secondary data sets, it is what it is. You can't change the data sets. You don't know who the respondents were. So you are limited to what you have. But again, the fact that you're using the causal framework doesn't mean that you're making causal inferences, right? Causal framework is just a framework we can use, but our results are still associational. So we're not making any causal claims from this study just because we use a causal framework. So that's a distinction I think we should highlight. But no, you cannot make causal conclusions from cross-sectional studies.
Thank you. Xavier, thanks for your suggestion. I suggest a 2 to 3 day online research clinic to master this platform. And the question is, can one upload manually collected data for analysis?
Yeah, that's what we did. Like we uploaded data sets from at the beginning. That data set was manually collected somewhere. So yes, you can upload any data set for analysis.
How does one put sample size calculation into consideration using your method?
Sample size calculation is, cannot be done post hoc. You've already had a data set, then it is what it is. You cannot change data set. What you could do is to calculate with this number of people, how precise will my estimates be? You have left the territory of sample size calculation a long time ago. Now you are in the realm of, with what I have now, how precise will my estimates be? Precision means how wide or how narrow will my confidence intervals be? So at this point, if you're working with public available data sets, you can only, you can only append data sets. You can't literally change the dimensions of the data set because it's already been concluded.
Thank you. And how does the platform test for reliability and validity of primary data sets?
That's not the platform's job. That's your job as a researcher. And testing for validity means it starts with, for example, construct validity. The questions I am creating, am I creating them in a way that makes sense? If you decide to collapse a variable, for example, refuse to answer with yes, there's no platform in the world that can save you from that, because right off the bat, you have introduced a lot of measurement biases into your study. So assessing for validity is not something that is a tool does. That's your job as a researcher.
Thank you. For those who are asking for subsidizing, someone said we should subsidize individuals. So we only have that option for institutions. If you would like your institution to have access to get this LMIC discount, which is about $50 per person for the entire year or 12 months, then you can introduce us to your research leads, your deans of research and we can have these conversations with them. Otherwise, for individuals, we don't have discounts at the moment. It's mainly for institutions. So thank you so much. I hope I might have missed some questions. And if I did, please forgive me. What about qualitative data sets? I'm going to close the session soon because we also have, typically we do take questions up until there are no questions anymore, but I'm also mindful that we have speakers who may want to leave shortly and they need to close the session. So any other questions, perhaps we can take them at a later stage. We will have future seminars and we hope you will be here to join us. I believe that everyone would need to practice a little bit more and we are here to help everyone master how to write a manuscript on the Chi-Squares platform. And I hope you'll all be there to join us in future sessions. Do follow us on LinkedIn. We've been sharing our profiles and Prof, I hope you are also sharing. I can't find your link, your YouTube SAMRC page. I'm trying to copy that at the moment so I could share them. I know that you shared a QR code with us and I'm sorry I had issues when I started the session, so I couldn't share it. If you can, please do so. Prof. Agaku, I think you can take maybe 1 or 2 questions and then I'll let, we will then close the session. So please, the question on qualitative data.
The platform is optimized for quantitative data analysis. Of course, for qualitative data, you can collect qualitative data on the survey part of a platform. Is an ecosystem, so you can collect data, analyze data, and all manner of things. But the analysis we just demonstrated is optimized for quantitative data. So you might have to look for other platforms if you are interested in purely qualitative work.
What other platforms should I use to support me with other sections of the research, especially when writing thesis proposal?
You will have to do research on that. I cannot recommend tools for you.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much, everybody. Sorry, I couldn't take all the questions, but perhaps if you want to stay a little bit longer, but we need to first close the session and let those who would like to leave go. And then maybe myself and some of my colleagues can take some of the remaining questions, especially those that are related to the platform itself. For now, I'll let Professor Akere close the session for us. Thank you so much. Prof. Akere, are you able to unmute yourself? Is Prof still here?
If she's not there, Prof. Okay, she's there.
Okay.
Is she there? If she's not there, Prof. Chadiwa can do that. Prof. Chad.
Oh, okay.
Prof.
Okay.
Chadiwa.
Okay.
Prof. Chadiwa, I'm just looking for her. Prof. Chadiwa. Prof. Chad, I'm not sure. Okay. You can unmute Prof. Martha Chadiwa quickly.
Chadiwa.
Yes, Martha Chadiwa. Okay. She's on mute. She's on mute.
Okay. Okay.
I'm unmuted,
Yes.
thank you, but I don't think the video can open. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining this session. This is an amazing session, and I think a lot of learning and a lot of take home for us. And just to say, this doesn't say that you cannot do this. If you remember, Lungi, everybody, you actually need to put in your data. It's not like you can just have this done by somebody. You still have to work so hard and to apply your mind to it. So thank you so much, Prof. Israel, for this fantastic platform that you've created. I think this is going to be helpful for us in the future. And congratulations on the presentation, which was very clear and that we are going to learn from. And thank you everyone who has joined from all over the world. This is just one of the first of the sessions that we're going to be doing. So just be on the watch out for more of the sessions that we're going to have in future. And thank you so much, Prof. Ola, for making sure that this actually happens and this comes to life. I think we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm excited that everything is coming to fruition. And thank you, Longa, for amazing coordination of the event. And looking forward to the next one, which you will see when we start advertising. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice weekend. Bye for now, and bye, Lungile. Bye, Prof. Israel. Bye, Prof. Ola, and bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Prof. Mata. Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, okay. So thank you, everyone. And Prof. Agaku, do you have any last words?
None. Thank you.
All right. And Prof. Ola?
Thank you so much. I think you've done everything. You've said all. We just look forward to the future and see what comes after this. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks,
All right.
everyone. You're welcome to leave.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, have a great day. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thanks.